Hi, this is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And you are listening to the Personality Hacker Podcast. And I'm sure you heard Antonia's voice just now. Crackling and sometimes squeaky.
I'm sick. Or at least I was sick. And when I was sick, I completely lost my voice. So this is the first day that I've kind of had my voice back. And so we're...
Lesser podcasters would not have recorded today. But we're saying, by golly, we're going to get a podcast recorded because you deserve it as our audience.
Well, and...
Come hell or high water. Or shout out voices.
The number one question I asked Joel was, do I sound really obnoxious? And...
I think you sound sexy and sultry.
Well, that's what you said. You said, no, you sound sexy. And so, I mean, I don't know if that's going to be a shared opinion by anybody else on the planet. But the question was, do I sound obnoxious? So you said no, and I'm going based on faith that I don't sound really obnoxious.
You know what? You have, I would say you have one of those like smoky jazz singer voices right now. Like you could be like in a lounge somewhere singing like a jazz song or something and just, I think it would work.
Oh.
You want to try it? You want to go ahead and just do a nice jazz song?
Well, at the best of times, my vocal cords can't really carry a tune. So I'm sure that at this point, with them totally being strained, the idea of like actually breaking out into song is it's a little impractical.
And so far, I've avoided kind of getting this terrible illness.
I've got a little scratch,
but I'm kind of. I'm stable.
This is total misery.
But that's not what we're talking. We're not talking about being sick today.
We're not.
We're actually talking about this idea of transitions, and in particular, scary transitions in personal development when you know you've got to scale up sometime. Because there are going to be times when you are growing as a person, and you're going to be faced with what we call, between the two of us, a scale up moment.
Right.
You know, you're at the precipice of, use the metaphor of like a vine where you're swinging, you're going to let go of one vine and leap over to the next vine, or there's a chasm you're jumping over from one side to the next. And that's frightening because you're making a leap or a transition point that may make you feel very uncomfortable. But it's the place you might want to be, but it looks frightening to do it. And kind of as a lead into this, I want to talk about the structure of movies, and we'll explain how that works out in a minute here. But the structure of every movie is split, most movies, except for Tarantino movies, are split into three basic acts.
And David Lynch movies.
There's a couple other filmmakers that don't do this, but the structure of most movies is into three acts. You have a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? This is not rocket science. The beginning sets up the characters. It sets up what's called the inciting incident. It's like the thing that kicks the whole movie off. And then the middle part is where a lot of character development happens. A lot of back and forth goes on between the characters, and they grow, and you got subplots and all that. And then there's the third act, which is the big problem that the movie has set up the whole time is solved. And usually there's like a big battle or a big, if it's an epic, action movie, it's a big battle or a big shootout. If it's more of a smaller character movie, it's where the character kind of like has that showdown with their father or whatever, and they tell him off and they, do whatever. There's a transition point between the second act and the third act of most movies that are good, well written, where the main character has been trying to solve a problem that was set up in the first part of the movie using whatever technique or whatever style or whatever's going on. And there's this like quiet moment at the end of the second act where that character, visits somebody, has a conversation, has a new insight, and they shift. They actually transition from trying to solve a problem or trying to get a need met or whatever from one way, and they make a transition or a shift, and they change tact, and they actually grow as a person in that moment. They scale up. They make this transition point. They jump the chasm. They swing to the next vine, and then they go at the third act, the third part of the movie, the final piece, with this new insight or this new way of behaving, and they're able to solve the problem in a new way. And good movies are well written this way. And we were talking right before the podcast, and you came up with a great example of this that I'd like you to kind of walk us through, having that framework in mind. From The Matrix, right?
Yeah. Well, when you were talking about this before, and I think it's awesome that you know all that stuff because you study movie making. So I think that that's really cool that you have movie tropes under your belt and an understanding of how movies are made, because movies are a really good, allegory for life, I think, a lot of times. when you were talking about this before, it made me think of the moment in The Matrix where Neo goes and visits the Oracle, and the Oracle tells him that he's not the one. And then a little bit later, because of some backstabbing from one of the crew members, Morpheus, the leader of the band, or this whole group of people, Morpheus is taken by the agents. Now, if you've never seen The Matrix, it was 1999 when that movie was made. There's no reason for you not to have seen that movie. It's possibly one of the greatest movies about modern philosophy ever. I love that movie. I love breaking it down. I probably watch it annually or once every couple of years. So please go watch The Matrix if you haven't seen it yet.
There are spoilers coming, though.
Yeah,
right?
A little bit of not terrible spoilers, but a little bit.
If you haven't seen it, though, you might want to.
Yeah, but if you have, I'm just calling back to that moment when, the kind of that epic build between the second and the third act, which is that Neo finds out from the Oracle that he's not the one. And then Morpheus gets caught by the agents, and Neo goes, well, it doesn't matter if I'm the one. I still have to go save Morpheus. So Trinity says, okay, she talks him into going with him. And the two of them re-enter the Matrix, and they go save Morpheus, right? And in the process of going and saving Morpheus, Neo discovers that he is the one. So the Oracle gave him misleading information, which is, that's addressed in the second movie. But what I think is so awesome about that sort of that transition for him, jumping from one vine to the next for him in that movie setting, is that the thing that he let go of was all this expectation around him being the one. Mm-hmm. And what he rested into, he jumped off the vine of I'm not the one, right? And did what he needed to do anyway. He rested into this concept of integrity, which is, I don't care if I'm the one or not. I got to go save Morpheus, which for anybody who isn't quote unquote the one is basically a death sentence. So he was like, yeah, I'm going to go face agents and I'm going to go get myself killed, but I have to because I have to go save Morpheus. He's the most important person. And so in the process of that, in the transition between the two vines, he discovers he is the one. And so when he hits the next vine, he's totally leveled up, right? He's completely rested into his own self-confidence. He's rested into his ability to, manipulate the Matrix the way that he needs to. And all of the agents are just, scared crapless of this guy, and they all flee. And so I thought that was probably the most, sort of famous example of what you're talking about. And that would have been a scary transition moment for him. Going, oh, I'm not the one, but I got to go face agents anyway. Yeah. I mean, how scary would that be? That would basically, it was like I said, it was basically a death sentence. And I think we face this in real life. We face those moments when we recognize that what got us here won't get us there. Mm-hmm. And we can't just keep doing the same thing. It's time for us to scale up. It's time to level up. It's time to let go of whatever vine of security and safety we've been currently swinging on. And it's time to jump, take the leap of faith to the next vine. And it's always scary. That transition is always scary and difficult and painful.
Yeah.
It's almost always painful to go through that transition period.
I think of just one more example before we go, just from another movie. And this just came to the top of my head. If you've seen this movie. So the movie Home Alone, right?
Another great 90s philosophical film.
I don't know if it's philosophical, but this scene struck me because I'll tell you, as a kid, as a younger person, as a kid, you always know when this moment in the movie happens because it's the most boring part of the movie for a kid. I'm serious. It's the part where it's the quiet talking scene. You've had action, and all of a sudden this quiet talking scene comes out of nowhere.
Oh God, the moral.
The moral of the story, whatever, and then the action resumes, and it's kind of I can go get a drink or go to the refrigerator, get a snack. As a kid, this happens. I remember in the movie for Home Alone, he's terrified of the next door neighbor, who's the older guy that has the shovel, and he looks foreboding, and he's left by himself. If you've never seen the movie, he's left by himself. His parents go on vacation with all his brothers and sisters. He's left by himself at home, and there's this moment where he's in a church right before the bad guys are going to come and rob his house, and the old guy comes in the church and sits down next to him, and they have a conversation, and he realizes that the old guy isn't so scary after all, And there's nothing to be afraid of there. And it gives him the confidence. There's a shift in his perspective to say, I can deal with anything. Like, I thought this guy was the most scariest guy on the planet. He's not. So these two bad guys that are coming to rob my house. It's a comedy, so it's, in the frame. They're not as scary either. And so he has this, it's a little kid transition, but it's a transition also. And it's just another example of this happening in a movie where this transition happened, this level up, this character development, this movement forward, understanding something about yourself. And you're right. It is a frightening moment of looking at something and saying, I think the frightening thing is that you want to get to the next level. Like most times, like if you're at the place where you're standing at the edge of the cliff and there's a place where you have to jump, you want to be over on the other side because you feel like it's either the right thing to do or it's something you really, really want. But it's like, but there's this big hole that if I don't make it, I'm going to fall down and die, metaphorically speaking. So it's like, it's kind of like, I don't know if I want to do that. Like,
it might be metaphoric, but it oftentimes feels like you're going to die. Like it feels like the kinds of risks that are really necessary for scaling up, for like leveling up or getting to the next place in our lives. There's a part of our brain that doesn't know that the death feeling is metaphoric. Like there's a part of us that thinks that death is actually going to potentially be a part of this equation. In movies, we see it pretty clearly, but I think in our individual lives, I think of things like this concept of like, say maybe leaving a career in order to start a business. Like there's a part of you that thinks that, if you fail, like you might die because we survive on these little green bio-survival tickets called money. And if I don't make enough money, then I won't be able to feed myself and I won't be able to like have a roof over my head, and death ensues.
Well, and even more than physical death is social death. Like I'll be a laughingstock of my friends. I tried to go start my own business. So I left this great cushy job, this great cushy career. I had a great paycheck. My wife and kids were taken care of, or my husband and kids were taken care of, or however your situation is. And then you go start that business and it doesn't work out. And all your friends are like, aha, see, I told you it wouldn't work out. And you're like, oh, man, I feel so stupid and so silly. And now I got to go back and get a job, but I can't get that job because I told that guy to go take a hike. So now I got to go find another job. And, like, it's not going to be cool like I had before. And, oh, man, so I don't even want to try to start my own business because I don't want that to happen to me.
Well, and I mean, again, that might just be social censure. And our brains also don't know that social censure doesn't mean death, because at one point in history it did.
Yeah.
If you got too much social censure, they would boot your butt out of the tribe and you'd go wandering all by yourself until a predator got you.
You have no TPs and no access to resource and you're dead.
Exactly. So it's like there's a reason why our brains, because we've talked about this before. Our brains have some old programming that aren't necessarily appropriate or relevant for modern times. But we don't know that. We don't know that our programming is like telling us or giving us signals for something that, was a lot more meaningful, say, 10,000 years ago than it is now. So we don't know that. So we don't know that this feeling, this, flight, fight, or freeze mechanism.
The 3 Fs.
The 3 Fs. We don't know that that's, based on a time period where things, with big teeth and pointy claws were all around all the time, as opposed to, say if I leave my job, that might be disaster. So it's legitimate. Like the fear we experience around transitions, it's understandable why we have those fears. It's understandable why our brains, attempting to help us live and survive, send us messages like, oh, maybe we shouldn't do that, because if we do that, it could be disaster. It totally makes sense why our brains do that to us. And also, it's good to remember that a lot of that programming and those mechanisms are not time period appropriate, right? They're not like appropriate for 2014. It's very rare when somebody starts their own business and that leads to death.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure it happens. I'm sure, like, somebody started a bungee jumping business and didn't know what they were doing, and they thinned themselves from the herd.
Didn't you know a guy at one time that had, like, a science business and he blew himself up or something?
Yeah,
like,
I worked for him. Yeah, I worked for that guy. And
so starting his own business eventually killed him.
Yeah, he was a chemist.
So warning to our listeners, don't start your own business. It will kill you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it does happen. And yet that's the exception, not the rule. So there's reasons why we feel these transitions are scary and big. I think the other piece of it, we were talking about this before, the other piece of why these transition periods are so difficult and scary, and actually the scary part isn't necessarily in the transition mode. The scary part, we're actually kind of talking about the first portion of this entire process,
the letting go.
Which is the letting go.
Yeah.
Like, the scariest time period is when you let go of the original, the original vine.
Because you know it's holding you, because you're holding on to it. Mm-hmm. But you don't know what's that other vine, like.
Or what's going to happen in between.
Yeah.
And the transition is the in-between time, right? Like, the letting go of the vine and then the jump, that's the transition. And that's usually, it can be scary, but I think, using this obviously as an analogy, when we're actually going through the midst of transition, like we've actually let go of the previous way of life or let go of whatever the security blanket is, and we're in the middle of the transition, it's not so much that it remains scary. It can remain scary. The letting go is usually the scariest moment. And then the transition is often just painful. Like, it's just frustrating, and it's a lot of logistical hassle.
You have to learn a lot of new skills you didn't know before.
You got to pick up all these new skills. Yeah. You got to learn stuff about yourself that might not be that flattering. Yeah. Like, and it hurts. It's just like, it just feels painful. And it's not until you grab the next vine, you're like, okay, we figured that out, right? Like, we're done there. That's cool. It's not until you get to that moment when you look back and you're like, oh, that wasn't so scary. Why was I scared? Or that wasn't that painful. Like, why didn't I just know that was not going to be that big of a deal? But we don't know that until we go through the process. And one of the reasons why it's so painful to go through the transition is I have this model that I teach my coaching students, like the students that are going into coaching. It was a model that another coach taught me when I was going into my coaching practice, called the HAT model. It's called Healing, Achievement, and Transcendence. And his basic theory was that all coaching or all personal development really falls into one of three categories: healing, achievement, or transcendence. And healing is anytime you are basically trying to get through a trauma or heal from a trauma of the past. So you're trying to get yourself up to a baseline. Achievement is when you're at a baseline, but you're trying to get to like the next phase of your life. Like you're trying to get through some glass ceiling, or you're trying to get the skills built or whatever to accomplish a goal. And then transcendence is anything that has a spiritual bent. And what I've observed is that when we go through an achievement time period, and oftentimes when we scale up or we go through these transitions that help us level up or scale up, we're talking about achieving something. We're talking about like creating a goal and trying to get to that goal. And I think of this as like sort of we're all pipes, and achievement means that we're putting some pressure through the pipe, right? So like more water, more pressure is going through that pipe when we're leveling up or we're trying to get something big accomplished. And what happens to the pipe is the more pressure that goes through it, the more cracks are exposed. And so those cracks are usually things that need healing. So we're going through an achievement time period, and then all of a sudden we see, oh my gosh, I have trauma. Or I have something from the past that I've never attended to because I didn't realize it was there. And one of the big things that happens when we're going through transition is we see all this like garbage surface from the past, or we see all this garbage surface from inside of us, and we go, I'm not ready for this. Yeah. Right? Because we thought we didn't have that stuff to contend with, and we took a leap of faith thinking we didn't have any, like obvious problems. And then now we put more pressure through the pipe, and now cracks are exposed, and we're like, oh my gosh, I'm totally not ready for this. Yeah. And so the transition time period can be painful because we call up all this stuff inside of us that we thought we had handled.
All the baggage you have picked up along the way, you have now with you, and you're like, oh man, I got like all this extra bags I'm carrying. I didn't mean to take these on my journey, but
Yeah.
you got to deal with them now.
Yeah,
You got them.
Well, I think of this as like anybody who's trying to master money in their life, and they start to build a business, or they start to, really go out for a lot of money in their career, or ask the boss for a raise, or whatever it is, right? Whatever it is that they believe they need to do in order to gain money mastery or money freedom or build a lifestyle business or whatever. And then suddenly they contend with what their actual real relationship with money is. Right? Like they never knew it before, but they have all this like programming from the past where they have an association with like rich people are bad people. And they didn't know that, right? And now they have some healing work around the trauma of rich people are bad people, right? And they have to make peace with that before they can become a rich person, because otherwise they'll self-sabotage and stop themselves from making money because they don't want to be a bad person. So something inside of themselves is like going, yeah, you're spinning your wheels a lot. You're doing all this, like you're spending all this time and effort in making money, but for some reason you can never get there because your brain is going, yeah, but you don't want to be a bad person. Right. So you didn't know that until you took this leap of faith and jumped and went through this transition of trying to make a lot of money. So there's a lot of like legitimate reasons why pain is experienced through transition. But that said, I personally don't believe that exposing those cracks means that suddenly you're not ready for this transition. Just because there were things there that you didn't know, like going through the transition is what exposed them in the first place.
Yeah.
So this is actually all part of the scale up process. Like that's part of what it means to scale up. That's part, like healing those
Exposing that.
Yeah, exposing the cracks and then patching them up during that transition is part of it. It doesn't mean you're not ready. It just means that there's some more stuff you have to handle before you can get to the next vine. Yeah. And then once you get there, you look back and you're like, you feel so accomplished. You're like, oh my gosh, I totally did it. I totally dealt with all that shit from the past, and I totally like made my dreams come true, or I leveled up, or I got to the next level of my goal. And here I am on, I'm on a precipice or whatever, and I'm looking down and going, I climbed up to get to this precipice. So, so like that transition period, as painful as it may be, it's like the scary stuff that surfaces in it, or the painful stuff that surfaces in it, should not be an indicator that you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
It actually should be an indicator that you're doing something right.
Yeah. So I want to play with this idea. This just came to me as we were talking to this idea of yourself and others. I think as you're talking, I'm seeing this like kind of pattern play out where if I'm ready to scale up to the next level, I have a tendency, at least for me, to look around and, I don't know if the word blame is right, or put the responsibility on other shoulders. Well, I can't scale up because of so-and-so or because of such and such. So it's external of why I can't scale up. And then if I think I can scale up, I think I have to do it all myself. I can't rely on others to help scale up. And I wonder if a better way to look at it is to flip those, to say, I'm the one holding myself here. It's no one else. And other people can help me get where I'm going. There's a person on that other side of that chasm that's been there. I can reach out and utilize their help to get over this part of it, instead of the reverse, which I think we have a tendency to put people on the side where we're at, and then it's a lonely journey to the other side. Does this make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's a new idea, so I'm playing with it, but it's this idea of flipping that on its head. It's not anybody else's responsibility where I'm at. I'm here because I chose to be here. I want to be over here. And it's not a lonely journey. I can find mentors or other people that are already where I'm at, or where I want to go, to help me get to where I want to be. And I can help utilize those relationships to get there. Is that making sense?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, and I think the idea of saying I'm where I'm at and I can't transition from where I'm at because of other people, that's a part of whatever narrative or story is keeping you in the safe zone.
Yeah.
And if I do it, I've got to do it all by myself. That's more of that same story. So yeah, flipping that around. I mean, if you can create one narrative, why can't you create the polar opposite narrative?
Yeah.
Like it's all just subjective narrative working anyway.
Yeah.
Like we talked about in the podcast on The Thinker Thinks, The Prover Proves. Like these are all just kind of, these are just sort of these stories we build around our beliefs, right? The things we want to believe to begin with. So why not just change it? Like, why not say, actually, I'm the only one that's keeping me here, and look how many people have gotten to where I want to go.
So that's easy to say.
Oh, super easy.
So let's get more practical. So I'm in a place where, let me think of a good example. Let's say I'm in a job, and I want to transition into owning my own business. But I feel like, well, my wife is putting pressure on me to bring home a paycheck, and I feel like I got 2 mouths to feed as kids, and my parents and my family and my friends think it's stupid to own a business, or it's silly, or I'm being pretentious. So all these people are keeping me from being able to own my own business. Like, they're at fault. They're the reasons I can't have my own business, and I really want to have my own business, but it's not going to happen because there's too many people in my life. And it'd be a lonely journey anyway. So taking that example, let's say that's the example that I'm working with. How do we actually begin to make changes and flip that and begin to look at moving forward? What would your perspective be? If you were coaching me on this, what would you say to me?
Well, why don't you have an answer on this one?
I don't know. I was teeing you up.
Yeah.
This is the thing. I was asking you a question that you could answer brilliantly and look really smart and really spectacular.
What's funny is that I don't know if every person is different. Every situation obviously is different. So it's going to depend. Like what does it take to start transitioning? It takes some balls. And what does it take to get through the transition? It takes some perseverance and some self-ownership and direction and knowing what you want. And then what does it take to get to the other side? Just persistence. So it's like, in a particular situation like you mentioned, one of the things that's difficult for me to really do a generalized coaching on this is I actually have always basically erred on the side of going into transition too much. I've never personally feared transition. It's staying in a situation that is boring or, has maybe got, has sort of run out of its interest or excitement or whatever. Like that generally tends to be the thing that I flee from. And one of the reasons why, I guess if I'm going to use myself as a model, one of the reasons why I haven't feared transition is I've always had this totally, probably massively inappropriate, overweening confidence in my ability to survive anything.
Yeah.
Just as a baseline, I've always believed I can survive anything. And one of the things that we were talking about before...
Except staying at a level and not transitioning. You can't survive that because you want to jump the next one so fast.
Well, yeah, but the idea of surviving something like that just doesn't sound interesting.
Longevity is not something you can survive.
Survive, sure, but don't really want to hang out there necessarily. And one of the things that we were talking about before is that my circumstances have changed to a point where now I have a baby and a family to think about. So I can survive anything, but can these, anybody who might be dependent upon me, can they survive anything? So suddenly my situation has changed where I'm not in transition mode all the time. And by transition, I would say that I probably got addicted to the excitement and the energy of transition. I basically lived like a gypsy for a while. I just kind of lived out of a suitcase. I loved moving. I grew up moving all the time. My resume is awful because I've pretty much done every job on the planet. I've worked in a law firm, I've worked in an elementary school, I've been a carny, I've been every job you can possibly be. And it's just because, yeah, well, not every job.
Not that one. Not the one we're thinking.
Not that one, Bob. No, not that one. But, or any of the ones around that one. I haven't done any of those. But I might have missed the boat on that. That might have been really interesting. But, yeah, so I've done all these different jobs. I've lived in all these different places. I've moved around like crazy. And transition stopped being scary to me. And now it's when things get tough, running... I'll say transition, but the word is running, right? I have a tendency to want to run to whatever the next opportunity is. And so because of that, it's really difficult. That actually poses opposite problems. You can't scale up in that either because you can, anything that takes or is going to give you some measure of mastery requires time and focus and attention. It requires time and focus and attention over the long haul. So it becomes more and more difficult to actually truly master anything if you keep running. So eventually I had to sort of start mastering something in order to not just be a dilettante my entire life.
Yeah.
And so that required me to stop transitioning. And for like the last 4 years, I've been creating a business, a lifestyle business for myself that has required me to stay with it, to stick with it, even when, there were definitely times when I was a starving artist where I'm like focused on this business and I'm like, I have absolutely no idea how I'm going to feed myself. And at this state in the game, that's not really a question anymore. And yet there's still moments when I'm like, is this really what I want to be doing?
Yeah.
And the answer is, yeah, actually it is what I want to be doing. But the question comes up not because I really don't know if this is what I want to be doing, but because I'm addicted to transition. So I guess your original question is, how do you help people who fear transition and have a tendency to stick with their life?
Mm-hmm.
And what, like they're not sure how to get to the next phase if they have all these safety triggers coming up for them. And the only thing that I can really suggest is understand that first of all, you're not going to die. Mm-hmm. Like, you're going to survive this. Right? Like, this won't take you out.
Yeah.
It might create hassle, and you might fear hassle or hard work or wanting, needing to stick with something even when everybody around you is not particularly happy with what you're doing, like you mentioned. But the truth is that you're going to survive it. So is it important enough to you? Because the other piece of it is, for me, getting out of constant transition and getting into focus, right? And focusing on one thing meant I had to choose the thing that I loved doing. Mm-hmm. And my guess is it's the same on the other side. Like, if a person has the opposite issue of me, which is that they have trouble taking that leap of faith, the thing you love, right? The thing that's fully in alignment with who you are and your purpose and your passion and the thing you want to be bringing to the world, that will have you taking that leap of faith just as surely as it has me rooting myself in that one thing.
Sure.
I think it's the axis point of those two pieces. I think it's the one constant is doing the thing that you're madly in love with doing.
Yeah, I think I was actually gonna, as you were saying that, I was gonna riff. I was gonna say that I think the first step is to know what you actually want.
Yeah. Because
I think there's what we truly want, and there's counterfeit what we want. In other words, it's like a secondary payoff, or it's something that's just good enough. I read this, I was reading this book a while back called The Artist's Way. It was a 12-week kind of book talking about reclaiming your creative self, right? And the author said that oftentimes people are in careers that are satellite careers of what they actually want. So if they want to be she used the example of like a filmmaker. Like, if you want to be a movie maker, you want to be a director, oftentimes people that want to be directors will end up in careers. Instead of pursuing that and really going after that, they'll end up in a career of like a script reader at a studio in Hollywood, or a talent agent for directors, but they won't be a director themselves. And so they do one thing separated, one thing removed, because it's like a counterfeit. It gets them close enough to feel kind of like they got what they wanted, but it wasn't what they truly wanted. So identifying, like you're saying, what you truly want. And I think making a transition, a level up transition, for me at least, and I think I've seen this play out with so many people, especially people that are scared of transitions, or it's a frightening thing to move forward with. I believe people are the key in surrounding yourself with people who have already been where you want to go, and like embodying them and putting yourself in places where you're going to be friends, you're going to get feedback from them, creating almost a mastermind with these people helps you get there much faster than trying to go on this solo. And it shows you that you're not going to die when you get to the other side, because this person went there themselves. This person spent the time to do what it took to get there, and you can have them in your social circle or whatever, and it's like a way for you to get accelerated learning, accelerated transition to what you actually want to do.
Yeah.
I think people are the key, for me at least, and I think for people that are kind of struggling with this. For people that jump from thing to thing.
For the crazy people like me.
For the insane. No, I think focus is important. I think sometimes, from what I can see, people that do a lot of jumping, it's that same idea of counterfeit. Mm-hmm. They're They're not necessarily going after what they want. They're jumping laterally instead of vertically. They're not jumping forward in growth.
Yep.
They're jumping to the side.
Yep.
Because they don't like their situation, but they're still scared to grow forward.
Yep.
So they keep jumping sideward, and they never move forward. They just keep jumping to left or right.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And it feels like they're making progress. And I'm not saying this is you necessarily.
Well,
but
I am. That totally was me.
It feels like you're making progress. Yeah.
For most of my adult life until I hit my early 30s, that absolutely was me.
It's just it's a more sophisticated way of tricking yourself into feeling like you're doing something proactive that you actually want when you're just kind of like jumping from thing to thing.
Yeah, look at all these skills I'm getting. Look at how much of a Renaissance person I am. And the truth is that I just wasn't particularly good at anything. I just was kind of dabbling at a little of everything. And that definitely was counterfeit growth. And so for me, true, honest, legitimate, authentic growth came from mastery. And I think for other people, true, authentic, legitimate growth comes from being willing to take those risks. And I think that was a fantastic example, this concept of like sort of counterfeit dreams or counterfeit movements. And I could see somebody doing that as an initial step to go towards what they want. Like, let's say you want to be a director and you've been in insurance your whole life, like getting a script reader role or whatever it was. That would be one step closer, which would be awesome. But staying there would mean, once again, you're holding too close to the vine, the vine of safety. So it's these transitions happen a lot through our lives. It's a matter of not ever settling on one vine in particular if you've got something to bring to the world. And that's really what it comes down to. Most of the time, people get into personal development. People get into personal development for lots of different reasons. All right, they get into it because they've had really traumatic pasts. And they're looking for healing, right? They're looking to be what they perceive as a non-broken version of themselves. And they want to be happy and they want to get past trauma. And so they get into personal development. And then other people get into personal development because they really, they're trying to figure out how to attain the goals that they want. And I think as we go down these paths, ultimately where many people dip their toes into the water, but maybe never feel completely comfortable to jump in, is that moment when they say, and then also I could play a bigger game. I could play a bigger game and go out and actually impact the world in some significant way. I could actually, make the camp better than when I got here. And so jumping from vine to vine is sort of precursor work to playing that bigger game, because playing the bigger game means that you are going to get to a place where it is kind of lonely. The bigger the game you play, the less people are represented there. The people who got there, it doesn't matter where they started from, they had to do a lot of transitions to get there. And so in order to play in those, the big leagues like that, you have to have this ability to transition, right? Even if it's pain, it doesn't always have to be a graceful transition. Transition gets easier as you go, by the way. As a transition junkie, I will tell you it gets easier as you go. That said, you have to get under your belt the ability to transition and not feel like, not stop yourself, not feel like you're going to die when you do it. And then if you're like me, who is, a person that isn't afraid of transition, then also getting to that big league place, right? Getting to playing a bigger game means that you have to have focus and mastery and a specific direction you're going.
Yeah.
So you have to have both of those components if you're going to play that bigger game. And it can't be counterfeit. It can't be inauthentic. It's got to be in alignment with who you are. So the best way to do that is to figure out, what means something to you.
Yeah.
What is your purpose?
And I think we'll probably talk about some of that kind of stuff on future podcasts on how to determine some of that kind of stuff and figure out what you actually want to be doing in life. We have some ideas and models around how to discover that.
Totally.
Which I think would be a great, at some point down the road, to talk about.
Yeah, let's do that.
I think just kind of the one last thought I have is I think people are comfortable. And we hit on this a little bit earlier, but I think, in my life, I've often said, my internal dialogue is, I'm comfortable with the devil I know. I'm holding onto this vine, and it may not be the greatest situation. I might be unsatisfied with it, but at least I understand it, and it's manageable, and I'm here and I'm present. I don't know what the next thing's going to hold, and the skills I've learned might not work at that next thing. So at least they're working here, and at least I'm okay, and at least I'm the word is at least, at least blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Whatever. At least ...
Yeah.
And I think of an example of someone who's maybe in a relationship where they're getting abused physically or emotionally, and they're like, I know I need to scale up. I know I need to leave this person, or I know I need to, set boundaries.
Right.
But I know this life. Like, this is familiar to me, and familiarity can really keep you at a place where, and you mentioned something circumstantial where you said you moved a lot when you were younger, and you were put in different contexts and new schools and new, your circumstances were changing so much that you had to reinvent yourself. You had to make transitions, and you had to try out new things because you had no option. You were forced into it. And so you created this pattern of being okay with that.
Yeah, but that was my comfort.
That was
that was where I was comfortable.
Yeah, to some degree. And and then you kind of maybe do some lateral jumps going forward later in your life, because that's you're used to jumping and jumping and jumping. But staying with it is something that was frightening to you. Sticking with a level and mastering something was like, oh man, what if I get bored or I get trapped or I get boxed in?
Trapped was always the fear.
I don't think that's what most people go through.
No.
I think most people, it's the opposite. They're comfortable and it's good enough. Like, at the end of the day, I don't know what the other thing might crash and burn, but this is good enough. And if I have to go to the end of my life and say, this is what I did in my life, it's good enough. And I can be happy to tell my grandkids that this is what I did.
Right.
I think that's where most people are.
Yeah.
And I think it's realizing that it's really focusing on what I get to the end of my life. Do I want regrets? Do I want to say it was good enough? Or do I want to say, yeah, I made a bunch of mistakes and made a whole bunch of different transitions and scaled up in some ways.
Right.
But man, look at what that led me to. Look at the decisions I made through that now at the end of my life, I lived a full and rich life.
Yeah.
Full of mistakes and, things that maybe didn't go perfectly right, but it was exciting because I got to experience stuff I would have never experienced had I not been courageous enough to find the people on the other side of that chasm and to make that jump.
Yeah, totally.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think comfort is not always your friend. Like, what you're comfortable with is not always... Like, we always see anything that's comfortable as our friend. All growth happens out of our comfort zone. And sometimes our thermostats are so jacked up that what we're comfortable with is very unhealthy for us.
Yeah.
And so, like, the person you're talking about that's in the, like in an abusive relationship, right? Like, well, I know he beats me, but at least he pays the bills or whatever, whatever it is that the person is saying at least. And so they're comfortable in the situation. And that means their thermostat has such a low setting of what is an acceptable degree. Yeah, their calibration of what comfortable can be is pretty unhealthy. So, like, and one of the only ways to know that about yourself, one of the only ways to know whether or not your thermostat is set at jacked up, unhealthy levels is to get out of your comfort zone and experience something else, and then recalibrate. So all growth happens out of your comfort zone. Comfort is not always our friend. Sometimes it can be it can be a counterfeit friend.
Yeah.
So knowing that, like you said, you get to the end of your life and you're like, I mean, the last thing that I want to do at the end of my life is to go, oh God, why didn't I just do that thing or that 10 things,
or at least try.
Or at least try.
I'm going to die anyway. Like,
anybody who right now could be potentially judging me for all of my mistakes or whatever, I'm probably not going to really care about them at all at the moment of my death.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if the end of my life is a ripe old age, which, knock on wood, it will be, those people probably will not be in my life.
However, you do care about them now.
You do.
It's hard to live your life in the future.
It really is.
We are present people.
Totally.
We are living now, and that person is going to judge me now. They are going to be critical, and they're going to talk behind my back about how stupid I am or silly I am for taking this action.
Totally.
So, yeah, that's a useful thing to look at the end of our life, but we don't live our life at the end of our life. We live our life right now. And so there is pain and discomfort that can happen from other people.
Totally.
presently.
There is no message in this podcast that says the transition period is going to be lovely.
Yeah.
Transition is tough. It is. It's out of your comfort zone. It includes scariness at the beginning and oftentimes pain in the interim. So transition is not going to be, a simple thing, an easy thing, a pain-free thing. And it's also the best thing that you can do. It is your true friend. Transition points, especially the transition points that are scale up transition points, they are your true friend, not comfort. So yeah, it is going to be painful. Thinking about the end of your life, what's nice about that is it gives you some zoom out, right? Like we're always so zoomed in and so myopic on our own individual lives. To be able to kind of imagine yourself at the end of your life gives you a little bit of perspective, right? Yeah. Like it allows you to zoom out and see and take in more territory.
You see a longer timeline of your life than just now.
Yeah, and you're also seeing like sort of like when you zoom out when it comes to time, you're also kind of zooming out when it comes to space and, geography, and you're kind of like, where am I going to be then? So you just kind of remember that things are beyond the here and now in the moment that you feel like you're completely stuck in or slurped into or whatever. So it is a good exercise.
Yeah.
So the book you were mentioning, The Artist's Way, I haven't read that book, but I know that you swear by it. I know that that is an awesome book, and it's been really powerful for you. And one of the cool things about that book that I noticed is that there are a lot of exercises in it. Lots of journaling, lots of exercises. So was there a specific exercise that was recommended in that book for determining the difference between counterfeit, like the counterfeit dream and the real dream? Or a way to determine whether or not you're like sort of giving yourself sort of a good enough proximity to the authentic thing that you truly desire? Versus actually being there?
Not in specific terms. Like, it wasn't like that I can remember right now off the top of my head. And I'm still in the process of reading through this. So I'm about halfway through the book, and I've spent a lot of time journaling as I go through. There was nothing specific like, do this exercise, and it's going to show you how transitions are, the way to, how you get to what you really want. There was an exercise, though, that she recommended in the book of basically allowing yourself stream of consciousness, because it's kind of like momentum begets more momentum. So if you're doing something, you're going to get more of the same.
Yeah.
Whatever that is.
Yeah.
So she recommends that every day, if you write longhand 3 pages of whatever's coming to your mind that day, you're mining your subconscious for what you truly want in life. Because you keep writing this out. And this is just for you. You don't need to show anybody. But you start writing, and if nothing's on your mind, she recommends just writing, there's nothing on my mind right now. There's nothing on my mind right now. Just keep writing over and over until you fill 3 pages. But do it every day. And you begin to start seeing patterns emerge in your subconscious of the things that are coming to mind, and it gives permission for things, because no one else sees it. It gives permission for things to come out that wouldn't maybe come out with your spouse or with your girlfriend or boyfriend or with your parents or whoever is in your life, because they might judge you. You're just writing whatever comes to mind. So it helps get some of that out, and you can start getting nuggets of what really is truly to the heart of what you want.
Yeah.
That's the best I can think of right now off the top of my head. I'm sure there are more specific exercises. I just can't remember them right now.
That's a great exercise.
But that exercise alone has brought me some insight that I didn't have before.
Yeah. So you do it every day. For how long?
Forever. She says she still does it. She's been doing it for 20 years.
Wow.
And basically it's just allowing that inner voice to come out. And she said that she's gotten book ideas and movie ideas, and because she's a screenwriter and author.
Yeah.
She's gotten business ideas and ideas about her kids, like how to do something with her kids, and like all these different ideas have come out of her subconscious because she's written out things every morning before she starts her day. And she also claims that other people that have done this exercise have had really great results as well. So that's an exercise that she recommends. Specifically about finding what you want in life, we have some ideas on that too. And we're not going to go into that in this podcast. But I think if you have an idea of what you want, the specifics of transitioning, of scaling up, of going through that scary thing. We have a mentor who talks about this concept of throwing your hat over a fence. Setting up a circumstance where, he uses the metaphor of going up. If you want to get over a fence, the best way to get over that fence is to throw your hat over the fence. Then you realize you got to go get your hat now. So you got to figure a way over that. Either you dig under, you bulldoze through, you climb over, you go around, whatever it is. But the thing you need is on the other side now. you've set up a circumstance where you've got to get over to the other side, and you've made it inevitable, the outcome that you want. So if you do know what you want, if there's a way for you to set up a circumstance where the inevitability is that you're going to make the transition, you're going to make the leap. And I think of one of the things, and this probably you're going to resonate with like crazy, one of the biggest transitions in people's life is when they get pregnant. You know, especially if they weren't planning for it, because it's a life change. It's a transition point of scaling up that is inevitable for you if you're going to keep the baby, right? It's coming in 9 months. You're going to have this new life that you're responsible for, that you have to transition into taking care of and transition into movement. And there's no choice. Like if you're deciding to keep the baby, it's going to happen in the 9-month mark, somewhere around that 9-month mark. That transition is going to happen. It's kind of like throwing your hat over the fence. Like it's going to happen. You've got to scale up at this point.
Yeah.
And so I think of like that as an example. But it's like this idea of what can I set up as please don't, audience members, just run out and get pregnant now just because you think that's a great way to grow. But there's this transition point of saying, I want to be over here. Maybe it's scheduling a conversation with a mentor of yours who's already arrived at the level that you want to say, hey, I want to be your personal assistant. You're in this type of business and I want to be in that type of business. So I'm going to become your personal assistant to make that inevitable that I'm going to go into that type of business. And then I'll try to be in that business. Or maybe it's, whatever, I want to write a book. So you announce to all your friends that on this date, your new book is coming out, and you make a big deal out of it publicly. And now it's going to be embarrassing if you don't write that book because you've just announced to the entire world, and you maybe even pre-sold copies to this book you want to write. So you got people's money. Now you have to write it because you've thrown your hat over the fence to make that scale up transition points. These are some ideas I have on how to maybe make that actually happen in your life.
Yeah, those are great ideas. So
looks like you're feigning quickly. You're like, man, we've been talking for 50 minutes. Is this podcast ever going to end?
Wow, is it a long one?
Something like that. Yeah, wow. It's been a long time.
Crazy.
And you're not feeling well. So
I'm not. So I am. I'm starting to fade. One thing, I think that's a fantastic idea. And I'd love to hear some feedback.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would love to hear people's feedback on, what is the leap that they know they should but haven't been making yet.
Or if you've been through this process.
Right.
How did you go about doing it?
How did you get through it? Right. What did it look like for you? Or what are some of the challenges you're still facing? And what would be awesome about that feedback is it might give some ideas on future podcasts on how to deal with some maybe those specific elements of transition. Maybe some tools that are really, we can come up with some tools that are really handy for helping people get through some of the big transitions in their life. I want to point something out. I didn't want to point it out during the podcast because I didn't want you to be self-conscious and throw you off.
Uh-oh.
You use the word chasm differently multiple times. It was adorable. You said chasm and then chasm and then back to chasm.
Did I really?
You did. It was so cute. Every time you did it, I kind of went tee.
Is this? It was so cute in the southern part of the United States. Like when Southerners in the United States use "well, bless your heart," they actually it really means you're an idiot. It really does. And any Southerners that are listening can vouch for this. Like those sweet little old ladies in the South of the United States that say, "Oh, bless your heart, honey."
They just
it
really
means you're
like,
such an idiot.
You're so stupid.
But it's so cute that you're an idiot. Is that what you meant by being cute, or did you actually mean it was
No, I actually thought it was adorable. But
okay.
and that actually is why I did mention it before, is because I didn't want you to think that I thought you were an idiot for it. I just thought it was super cute. Because I think, is chasm like sort of where maybe like how the British say it? Because they say stuff like they say, instead of schedule, they say schedule. And
I do that too. I interchange those two as well.
You do. You totally do. So I thought you got like poshy British on me for a second.
I don't know. Maybe.
I know. It was adorable.
Maybe it was too much. I don't know. What's something poshy British?
All right. We can't do podcasts when I'm sick anymore.
You're too loopy.
I'm too loopy. I am on a medication right now, in case you were wondering. All right. So we should probably cut it down. So we should probably pack it in and send me home. So that's this week's podcast. Thank you so much for sticking with us, despite my probably very obnoxious, though possibly sexy voice.
Smoky
voice. And seriously, give us some feedback on how transitions have worked for you.
You can find us at personalityhacker.com, on Facebook, facebook.com/personalityhacker, twitter.com/personalityhack, HACK, and we want to hear from you. This is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
We'll talk to you on the next podcast. Peace out.